You're just going to have me up here for just a little bit because I know a lot of you take classes from me, and I want to turn this over to Zoe. I want to introduce or maybe talk about something that I haven't really talked about in any of my classes. And that is the role that human resources, and Zoe's going to mostly focus on executive coaching, play in making corporations successful. And I wanted to start by telling you a little story that I heard on the way here this morning. I was coming in the car, I got a phone call from a friend who's an executive coach, and she's very excited because she has a client tomorrow that's going to be spending the whole day with her, basically working on herself. She wants to get a great, one-day start for a 3-month coaching engagement. And this is the story that my friend heard from this prospective client. So this client, I'm going to call her Sally, worked as an executive in a very large corporation for quite some time and was very successful, and I'm just going to shorten this, and got a new boss. The new boss apparently wanted someone else in that position. And so that new boss started slowly but surely taking projects away and giving them to someone else. At that point, after a while, she kind of became burned out, was very upset, depressed, and so she went and asked to be transferred to another department, which was easily done because it's a very, very large corporation. So they moved her to another department in the corporation where she was there for about 7 months, and eventually she resigned because she realized that if she didn't resign, she was going to be asked to go. So, does this sound familiar to you?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, it happens many times. And anyway, so she's out of work for a little while and finally got another job with another corporation here in the Inland Empire that has it's a global corporation, has places all over the place and all over the globe, and is very successful. So she's got this job that she really loves. And about 13 months into the job, she got fired. About 6-7 weeks ago, she got fired. So, so we were talking on the way here. What is it that this person wants from a coaching tomorrow? And how is it that somebody gets to a place in their life where they're very, very successful, and they get kudos and they feel like they're just at the top of the world, and in a very short period of time, this is what she said to my friend. She said, "I feel like I don't know who I am anymore. I have lost myself, and I need help finding myself again. And so I'd like to retain your services to be a coach." Not an unusual story. Not an unusual story at all. And the role that HR plays in this kind of situation, I mean, I'm just going to pick this one. This person went to HR for help. This is where people go who are wanting help to whatever it is in terms of their profession, in terms of doing better at their job, in terms of maybe some kind of compliance issue, and Zoe's going to cover that. But I look at HR as the soul and the conscience of a corporation. It is the place where people go to find who they are, actually, to find a place where maybe they can be guided in a certain way, where maybe they can be the best they can be, maybe they can get more familiar with the culture, maybe they can acculturate better, maybe they can set goals, whatever it is that people, individuals need to work in a setting, in a corporate setting. HR plays a very important role in ensuring that corporations are successful, because without people who are engaged and without people who really want to be there, the corporation cannot be successful. I think, I talk about this to you guys a lot in my classes about finding meaning in your lives and finding what it is that you really want. Well, HR plays a very strategic role in tying individuals' purpose, meaning, to whatever vision, mission the corporation has. So just think, if you have people who are working, who just go in there every day, clock in, clock out, go home at night, and when they come in the next morning, they just, well, okay, I'm here because I'm going to get my paycheck. That's not going to be a very successful corporation. This is the kind of place where I would like to work. I would like to get up in the morning, on Monday morning, and say, wow, what a great day I have ahead of me, because I'm going to go to work today. And it isn't because I'm going to get a nice big paycheck. It's because I'm going to get to make a difference. And because the place where I work is a place that I feel makes a difference in people's lives. And I am in line with that vision and that mission, and I know what it is that I'm supposed to be doing to make that happen. Okay? So that, in a nutshell, is kind of what HR does, and she's going to go into more detail. I also want to give you some statistics. The HR field, is one of the fastest fields. It's going to be growing at a faster pace than most other careers. 21% growth in the next 6 years is projected, much higher than accounting, way much higher than finance, higher than marketing, higher than management. And this is according to the U.S. Department of Labor statistics. So there you go. There's one reason to be an HR person, and it's only money at this point. The other, again, is that it is a place where you really can make a difference in people's lives. And not just individuals, but corporations. So I encourage any of you who are interested in maybe looking into the career or into that program to come see me or Cheryl or whoever you want to get you connected with the right people to talk to you about that. I'm going to turn it over to Zoe. I have some other stuff that I wanted to say, but sure. Oh, yes. Next Thursday at 5, the 17th, we are having our first Human Resource Management Club meeting, and we're hoping to turn that into SHRM, which is a Society for Human Resource Management. It's an international association of human resource professionals. It's at 5 o'clock. Our first speaker is going to be the Associate Vice President for Human Resources at Loma Linda. They have over 13,000 employees. She oversees the all of the HR functions for 13,000 employees, several corporations. She works with several different presidents. She basically manages and leads out in all kinds of different projects and things that go on at Loma Linda related to how to get people engaged in their work, how to make people be happy when they show up at work on Monday morning. And wouldn't it be a wonderful thing if you guys got up every morning when you had to come to class? I think I talked to you about this in my class. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you walked in my class every time you walked in? I am so happy to be here today because I know the reason why I'm sitting in my classroom. I know the reason why I'm sitting here and paying all this money. Okay? Very important. Wouldn't it make a difference to you if you knew exactly why it is that you are sitting in that class and what it is that you're supposed to be getting out of that class, and knowing that being in that class makes a difference to you personally because it's going to allow you to express who you are, to give to others, to make a difference to yourself and to others. And that's the kind of thing that HR does, and that's the kind of thing that I hope that you guys get to do when you come to my classes. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Zoe, who's going to talk to you a little more about HR and executive coaching.
Thank you. You know, I'm struck also by your comments about creating meaning and engagement, and really even at this level, because you know, I've been doing this work in HR for about 20 years. I know I don't look old enough to even like be in the professional world, but I actually am. I don't look old enough to have a 9-year-old either. But anyway, that is a totally different topic. But you know, after working for 20 years, it's become a natural part of me that I went to a Christian institution all the way through. That, you know, I studied psychology because I was fascinated with, you know, how people think and all the stuff that people bring to work, and that's really what got me into IO psychology anyway, and the field of HR. And it's become just, I've assimilated my Christian point of view into my professional self. So, you know, I really do think it's important at this stage of your careers when you're kind of exploring who you are, not only as a student and a contributing member of society, but you start thinking about the kind of jobs you want to have, the kind of career meaning you want to create for yourself. It's really important, I think, to think about that intentionally now and take the opportunities to reflect on that, because once you've been, you know, doing it for a very long time, and I'm sure some of your professors and so on would share this, that, you know, all of those foundational beliefs and values that we develop at this stage of our life really shape who we become in the workplace. And it's, you know, like that story you just told about that executive coach. I mean, I've heard that story over and over again of people who have forgotten who they were. They've just lost track of why they started the kind of role they did in the beginning, you know, to begin with. So,
and in corporations tend to tend to do that to certain people.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's the importance of really understanding who you are now and understanding how to set up systems and HR systems where people can thrive and avoid this kind of thing from happening.
Okay. So this microphone is very familiar to me because I'm sure it's the same microphone that I used in 1985 when I was sitting in here and singing for worship for one of these meetings. I'm sure it's the same microphone. 17-year-old microphone. Okay, so I am very happy to be here today. I see a few familiar faces. I'm very sorry for those of you who sit in my psychology class or my business class. You have to hear me yet again go on and go off on tangents and tell stories. But I think what I'm very pleased to be able to do is, by telling a few stories, like the one you shared this morning, just breathe a little bit of life into this field of HR. HR gets a bit of a bad rap. In the companies I worked for, HR is considered the policeman of the organization. The rule keeper, the rule maker. People like me are considered the fluffy, touchy-feely types because we're very interested in, helping to create team effectiveness and organizational effectiveness, and sometimes that means talking about personality and communication and stuff that's kind of fluffy to people who, don't really indulge in those kinds of ideas at work. Sometimes HR is considered order takers, a little bit like, some fields like accounting and other operational kinds of fields, because there is a key component of HR that's pretty, move something from here to there. It's a process. Hiring people, getting people into a system, ERPs, kind of personnel systems, all of that stuff takes, interaction. So it can be viewed as kind of a boring operational job. But the cool thing about HR, it's all those things and then some, and we talked about this a little bit in the IO class, is that, the field of HR and an IO psychologist, can contribute in a variety of different ways in business. So it's one, I think, of the unique elements of business because there's so many different kinds of ways that you can kind of execute the work of HR. And I don't want to oversimplify it, of course, but if you go to the next slide, thank you, Chad. Chad's my ESP laser beam. Okay, so I thought just today I would try to answer just 3 questions, keep it simple. Just talk a little bit about the field of HR. We could talk about this, we could do a week seminar. You guys would totally collapse. That would be awful for you. But we could do it if we needed to. So I'll talk a little bit about the different areas of HR. And then just to kind of pull out one component of HR, we talked about focusing on executive coaching today. It falls within one function of HR called learning and development and leadership. So I'll talk a little bit about that because it tends to be one of the more harder components of HR to measure and get return on investment, and it is kind of the holy grail, if I may say, in folks in my field, because it's very challenging to create metrics and success measures for stuff that's kind of seems sort of fluffy sometimes. And then how does coaching typically work? So, good? All right? So the next slide is a summary of what is human resources. So it's all of these things that you see up above. It's really helping employers treat employees fairly. So, folks that work in HR are mindful about making sure that managers and leaders have the skills they need to have honest conversations with their employees. Things like performance and setting goals and talking about product development and how to do the work and developing employees, and those things don't come natural to most of us. When I was new in my career, I was just constantly surprised at how poorly people treated each other sometimes in the workplace. And I thought, well, just because we're grown-ups, we're supposed to behave like mature people, but that is not necessarily true. So it really is, for some people, a skill that they have to develop to, have healthy conversations and manage people fairly and equitably. And there's a whole lot of regulatory and compliance kinds of things that go along with that. Helping jobs become more interesting and satisfying. So why is that? Why does that matter? Why is it important for folks in HR to keep a pulse on what's going on in a business and help to create interesting jobs for folks? Well, there's a lot of research that makes a connection between job satisfaction and employee commitment to actual performance of the company. We've talked about this in both of my classes, and I would imagine you're going to get exposed to this concept too of employee engagement. And there is now plenty of documented data that makes a clear distinction between the kinds of activities that employers do. One of those is creating meaningful jobs and creating interesting jobs with success of a company. So that's a pretty easy sell nowadays for companies to think about creating jobs that are interesting and satisfying. It grows the business. Helping workers be more productive also goes to engagement. I mean, the worst thing is having a very, a job that isn't very satisfying, but then isn't very challenging. And there's a lot of talk today and a lot of work in organizations about efficiency and creating economies of scale because the economy is so tight. And so, even when a job opens up in a company, I've talked to colleagues now, they're really, the HR department is very thoughtful about how do we find the right person for the job who's going to enhance productivity in the department that they work in. And those kinds of conversations I really don't remember having 10 or 15 years ago when I was 15. Treating people from diverse backgrounds fairly. So this is a really important thing, and this flows from Title VII and the ADA and other kinds of kind of compliance. Title VII, okay. So this is really about making sure that everybody is treated fairly in the workplace. So it goes for the whole gamut of human resources. So, folks that are involved in recruiting employees, going out there, throwing the net out on LinkedIn and other social networking sites or networking meetings. Folks that will be interested in talking with you about joining their companies as you're kind of moving through your career here as a student. All of those companies are very, very mindful that they need to treat all their applicants in a consistent and fair way. That there are ways to do interviewing of potential candidates that need to be legal and fair and consistent. And from an IO perspective, sorry, I keep doing this because I see one of my students in the back. So, but from an industrial organizational psychology perspective, it's really important too because you want to be able to demonstrate you've selected the best person for the job. And companies now are very mindful. They want to eliminate any factors that would lead to the wrong kind of a hire. And diversity and fairness plays right into that. Training is very, very important too. So HR does we do a lot of training in human resources, but it's also training leaders and managers, employees to treat each other fairly. So it's not just training managers or training people how to do a job, but it's really how to treat each other in the workplace. And then fairness is also about rewarding promotions and raises and kind of distributing bonus pools and merit increase and so on in a fair and equitable way. Pay for performance has to take diversity into account as well. So, all right. So, and then another piece of human resources is overseeing organizational leadership and culture, and that kind of plays into what we're talking about today in terms of helping to equip. These are HR folks helping to equip leaders to be more effective at being a leader. Like I said a few minutes ago, it doesn't come naturally to most of us to be a good leader. Good leaders, I believe, can be developed. I mean, you can't go from 0 to 60. I think you've got to have an aptitude to be effective as a leader, and coaching is a really wonderful mechanism to sort of shape that and drive that. And so HR is heavily involved in thinking through, usually with bigger companies, how do we need to develop our leaders so that we can continue to perpetuate the kind of culture we want to perpetuate, that we can still maintain our brand positioning in the marketplace. If we have leaders who kind of do not fall in line with the goals and the missions and the values of the company, then we're at risk of not delivering our results and having an unmotivated workforce. So human resources, there are some folks in human resources who think about that a lot, and that's mostly where I have played over the last few years. And like you said, Dulcie, it's really about the people side. So I just kind of added the people side of the business, and I like that, the whole conscience piece, because I do think that's a significant component. So I think that's it. Anything else you'd add in terms of what else HR does? Okay. Thanks, Chad. So this is just a list of things that I kind of talked about and described a minute ago. So job analysis is really designing jobs. There's recruiting and selection. There is performance management, which is about helping employees kind of set goals, manage to goals, helping managers have those conversations, evaluating performance so that pay can be distributed fairly and appropriately. And then training and development. So I'm going to transition in a minute to talk a little bit about coaching and some of my experience as an executive coach. But coaching really fits in the training and development piece of HR. So I won't say anything more about that. Benefits and compensation is probably the one area of HR where I haven't dabbled much in. But this is all about thinking through, analyzing, and delivering HR services around benefits and perks to employees in a thoughtful and cost-effective way. And compensation, of course, is all about pay. And then compliance and regulatory, there's a lot of, not a lot, but there are some kind of issues with respect to HR around documenting that, HR has to document that there is a diversity of applicants for a company. HR has to keep track of people that leave the company and why they left the company. And HR also is heavily involved in training people on very important regulatory requirements coming out of Title VII, like sexual harassment and race discrimination, disability awareness, all those kinds of things. And then depending on the kind of company you're in, HR is also involved in business kinds of training as well, and regulatory training. For example, at Disney, being a global company, we had international labor standards that we as a company had to go by. So we had to make sure that we weren't hiring manufacturing companies around the world that were sweatshops, or paying little kids pennies to produce products for us. So, that would be awful for the brand, for Disney. So Disney wanted to train its employees on how to be tuned in to those kinds of issues if they were involved in manufacturing and product development. So those are the kind of things too that have to do with compliance and regulatory. So I'm going to talk a little bit about coaching now. Let me do this. Okay. So talking a little bit about coaching within the context of the development piece. I love the story you gave, because I think we should just work that example a little bit. But there are some common misconceptions about the role of coaching, and I even use the term executive coaching because that's mostly the coaching that I'm familiar with. I've worked with managers as well, and the kind of manager you're talking about is somebody who's kind of derailed, right? Kind of been very successful, promoted along the way for probably a very long time. Probably, I'm making it up, but it's possible this individual didn't get really great coaching from her boss and good leadership and guidance. Sounds as though there were some courageous conversations that didn't happen. So, people veer off course. And so some of the coaching myths are that, you're doing something wrong if you are being coached. And, maybe in this person's case, that could very well be from the perspective of the boss. But really, that isn't necessarily the case. Most coaching today is not about trying to fix somebody who's doing something wrong. It's about how do we kind of raise up their skills and be more effective. Some other common myths is that the coach is better than the person being coached. So this is all about, the caliber and the expertise of the coach. So it's funny, when I was new in my career, I always knew I wanted to be a management consultant. I knew that I didn't exactly know what that meant, but I knew I wanted to be that. And I remember going through some informational interviews just after I finished my master's. I went straight through bachelor's and then did my master's. And then, of course, I had my little briefcase and was out, shopping the pavement with my half-page resume. And I want to be a management consultant, and meeting with executives, and they would just look at me and said, "Yeah, but you're 21. How can you be a management consultant when you don't know anything yet about life?" So there is this myth that the person being coached has to be successful themselves, and that the coach is better. I don't really believe that, but I do believe that a couple of gray hairs in the school of hard knocks is very good for somebody in a coaching engagement, because you do need to have a little bit of a point of view, and experience always helps. Coaching means criticizing what others are doing. That's a myth as well. The coach is always right. Another myth, coaching is concerned only with the person being coached, doesn't require much introspection by the coach, him or herself. Now that's an interesting, have you come across that in your experience, Kelsey? The coach is not being, doesn't require introspection from a coach in a coaching relationship.
No, I have not.
Okay. And then the one being coach, always do what the coach suggests. Yeah, this is a big myth, because really an effective coaching relationship, and the kind of relationship that Dulcie's talking about, is one that has mutual dependencies between somebody who's listening and giving advice and action planning and development planning with the person being coached, who needs to take ownership for their own foibles and their own development plan and kind of how they see themselves going forward. So the coach does not necessarily always have the right answer, but definitely a coach should be very mindful of what are really good, effective practices and really present those in a way to help the coachee or the executive, try new skills in a way that isn't too risky, right? Because what sometimes happens in coaching situations is, and I've seen this happen, where an executive will go away for a couple of days to an executive training program, and they get kind of a bit of coaching within the context of that. Then they kind of have this big, moment. They go back to the office, and then they're like this whole different person, and people are completely freaked out, and their employees don't know what to do with them. So, and then they can't sustain it, right? Because it's really hard to make significant changes really quickly with behaviors that have been developed over a long time, and when you've been getting a lot of success in your career based on certain behaviors. So, a good coach will help a leader make small little changes that, and engage the employees of this executive in the conversation about, how we all should be working together better as a team, and not burdening the executives so much to change their behavior and all is going to be great. It's really kind of a mutually dependent organism, I think, is the word I think of when you're thinking of an executive working with their team. And the coach is not responsible for successes and failures of the coachee. I have brought in external coaches many times in my career, and these folks earn a lot of money. They can earn a lot of money if if they work with big companies and if they've got a good working knowledge of how a company works, because that legacy information, that kind of tribal knowledge, can be very helpful for an executive who's trying to learn how to navigate more effectively in an organization or develop their leadership skills. So putting too much pressure on a coach in the coaching relationship is really not necessarily true. It's really the leader that has to take responsibility for their own coaching, their own development. And coaches don't really have to care about the people they're coaching. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So there's some common things. People that I work with in my career, coaching, the perception of coaching has changed a lot over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years. Now coaching really, when an executive, calls me up, I'm sitting at my desk in HR and says, I've got a VP here, she's derailing, here's some things that have happened. Her employee engagement scores, her employee satisfaction scores have really tanked over the last couple of years. We want to have an executive coach to work with her on motivating, communication, team building. And I've completely forgotten where I was going with that. I got caught up in my story. Yeah, I guess I'll have to just move on. It'll come back to me.
Yeah.
It'll come back to me. Oh, I know what it is. It didn't take long, did it? It's really important for someone to want the help. Right, so this individual here actually called somebody and said, I've hit a wall, I don't know what to do, but I have lost myself. So, forcing a coaching relationship onto somebody is not the best way to really encourage a learning environment. And that goes true for any kind of training and development, particularly when you're talking with executives and executive coaching, just it's a risky thing to put yourself in the hands of somebody who's going to give you advice about how you could improve. So that's where I was going with that. Barely recovered from that. All right, so there's some benefits to coaching in organizations, and you can see they're really hard to read there, so I'll just highlight a few. For the person being coached, and again, I'm focusing on more the executive level, but this is the same for management level too, is that it's really great when somebody has an opportunity to sit down and reflect on what they're really good at and what's made them successful for their careers so far. The flip side is they often get some data and some information that they're really not doing as well in other areas. So that's why it's really important if a coach is working with an executive who's engaged in the process, doesn't feel like they've been forced upon to do some coaching, because it's really hard. I'm sure all of you can think about times in your life where, you know, a sports coach or a parent or a teacher or, you know, somebody that you really respect in your life has said, oh, you've got to totally fix that. That's just not going to be a productive behavior, or that's a skill you got to work on, or this is something about your personality or who you are that you might want to think about, you know, changing or growing or developing more thoughtfulness about. So it's hard to get that kind of feedback. We do this kind of feedback in a very logical way through typically interviews or 360 feedback, and I know we've talked about that in a couple of our classes. So another big benefit in terms of getting kind of a picture of how I'm doing as an executive is that I can then make changes and really improve my performance as a leader. So it's a big benefit. You know, it's all very well to say, oh, I just know I need to get better at organizing my time. But you know, without somebody coming alongside and helping you think through specific ways to do that, which is part of the role of a coach, it's really hard to make those kinds of changes. So that's a big benefit to someone being coached, is that they have the kind of a partner to help them really develop things and improve their performance. And you know, a really great outcome, and it's not always this way, but a really great outcome of coaching is that the leader changes their behavior and they become more in line with the direction and the vision of the company. And that really just continues to perpetuate the culture that the company wants to aspire to. I heard a story once, it was not somebody I worked with, but a story once early in my days at Disney of a leader who yelled a lot at employees and really embarrassed them in meetings. And they were stellar, absolutely stellar at product development in a very specific area that was going through growth for us as a company. So they were a real asset, if you will, a human capital asset to the company because of their experience and how good they were. But they completely annihilated the people that worked with them on a regular basis. And we in HR, you know, had conversations about it. What do we do about this? We've got somebody really successful, but completely behaves in a way that's counter to the kind of culture that we want to have here at Disney in terms of, you know, being thoughtful and listening and building on great ideas and innovation. This person is just shutting all of that down. And so we did bring in a coach for some pretty, you know, focused coaching, and that person did make some adjustments with, you know, very resilient behaviors when you've got somebody that's comfortable, you know, yelling, and they've done really well for a long time, kind of getting rewarded despite those behaviors. Eventually that person did move on to another company because they just were such a poor fit. So there's an example of a coaching engagement that wasn't as successful in shaping someone's thinking and behavior to perpetuate the culture. That one was a fail. And these things sometimes happen. And then another thing that's really a benefit of coaching that I've learned is that leaders become better coaches themselves of the people that work for them. It's kind of a side benefit. And if you think about it, those of you who've played sports in school, you know, soccer or something, and maybe you've moved on and now you, in summertime, you'll like coach kids in swimming or coach them in soccer just for fun or do some kind of teaching or coaching. You know, probably because of your own experience, you know what it feels like to actually be a player on that team. And it's very much the same way for executives who are going through this kind of a process, is they become more self-aware, more introspective, and they learn some really good skills that naturally tend to extend to the team. And so there's a big benefit to an executive to add those to his skill set. And to the organization, there's a lot of great benefits to coaching as well. Turnover. You know, if you can successfully through a coaching engagement maintain the engagement of a high-level executive or any management person in the company, but you know that kind of engagement can really help to drive commitment and loyalty and help to, again, to perpetuate the culture that the company wants. It can enhance individual organizational performance, and really a big thing about coaching that I've noticed is that, you know, people talk, of course, around the water cooler, and people always seem to know if somebody on their floor in their department has got a coach. Number one, because executives try new behaviors and it kind of is weird and strange at first, and of course the team is often aware that there's a coaching engagement because they're involved in giving feedback and so on. But it is a good message for companies when they make this kind of investment in this piece of development, because it shows that they're really committed to employee development and that they're willing to put their teeth behind it by creating opportunities for very visible, high-ranking employees to learn, and that it's safe to do that. And that often has a benefit all by itself in terms of creating an environment where employees feel like, wow, you know, this company really cares about people. They're trying to work on, you know, creating more learning opportunities and coaching engagements for executives, and that's one way to do that. Positive work environment, right? So that can affect culture. And succession planning and development. Okay, so this is a really interesting benefit for an organization. So particularly in the economy that we're in right now, in the last five years or so, I've noticed that companies are spending a lot more time, and people in HR departments are spending more time understanding what are all the skills and the strengths of key employees. They're top performers. We call them high potentials, those we believe are going to continue to contribute to the company. Who are they? And how are they being paid? Are they being paid at or above other employees that aren't as strong? How do we want to invest in these employees to keep them so we don't lose them to our competition? Because it is hard now, right now in this economy, for companies to open new positions when somebody leaves. And it's highly competitive environment. And companies typically want to promote from within. And in a tight economy, when there's no open jobs, it's really hard to move people around inside an organization, right? It's like musical chairs. If there isn't an empty chair, there's no job. So it means that development can be limited. But the executive coaching process can help to, it's a very tangible way for companies to track the kinds of development opportunities that are happening at the executive level. And that's really important in thinking about developing leaders and filling jobs of leaders that when they do open, and really having a bench of talent, right? People ready, sitting on the bench, ready to go out on the playing field and contribute to the company in a bigger and bolder way. So development is really important because it builds skills inside the organization, and executive coaching is a great way for that to happen. So people are ready for new jobs when new jobs do come open. So those are some of the benefits of coaching. And the next slide. Oh, so common coaching issues. So in your story is, there's a couple of bullet points on here, Dulcie, that probably go through some of the issues you talked about just in that little vignette there. But unresolved conflicts and poor communications is a common reason why coaches are brought in to work with executives. Communication is a really big thing. Remember a few minutes ago I was saying that when I was new in my career, I thought this because we were grown up, we were all, treated each other nicely, and that really isn't, and we're all mature, and that really is not the case. That's not the case at all. That people really have learned and been reinforced bad behaviors and bad communication patterns for years and years and years. And often a simple coaching issue is just getting people to calm down, like the guy was telling me about that was yelling at his employees. Getting people to just be more thoughtful about how they plan the work for their employees. Resolving conflicts more constructively rather than letting things fester. Difficult behaviors, so a lot of social science and behavioral science in coaching. Relationship issues with coworkers and employees, as well as looking up the organization too. One of the executives I worked with, she had a very big job in our company, was responsible for working with a big animation firm, a company that Disney purchased a number of years ago. She was absolutely stellar at building relationships and had incredible stamina for keeping track of where conversations were in the area of business and kind of moving negotiations along to kind of make decisions about products and where we were going to go with movies. But she was completely thoughtless when it came to her peers working with the president in terms of what was really important to them. So she was really always very mindful of just where she was going and not mindful of her peers. So, it was really important that she, fix that's not the right word, but that she become more aware of that and devise ways with a coach to demonstrate more listening and more patience and demonstrate that she was more open to other points of view around the executive table. And because her relationships were really suffering. And so it was really hard for her to do, and she did make some significant improvements over a long period of time, but she did.